Hello and welcome to another episode of Earth911's Sustainability in Your Ear. This is the podcast conversation about accelerating the transition to a sustainable carbon neutral society, and I'm your host, Mitch Ratcliffe. Thanks for joining the conversation today. Farmed salmon has been touted as a solution to food scarcity as the world turns to eating more seafood. The United Nations Food and Agriculture Organization estimates that seafood production must increase by 29.3% before 2030 simply to keep up with demand. Our guest today is Simen Sætre, who is a co-author of The New Fish, The Truth About Farmed Salmon and the Consequences We Can No Longer Ignore, which he wrote with journalist Kjetil Ostli. The book examines the salmon farming industry, which started in Norway in the 1960s. It's a history of the business and chronicle of the many unanticipated consequences of fish farming, including the use of chemicals in fish feed that harms aquatic and human health, a pandemic of sea lice that infects farmed and wild fish, and the competition between salmon farms and human food supplies for feedstock, particularly in Africa, of all places. As with domesticated cattle, pigs, and chicken, an industrial approach to cultivating meat has turned a vibrant species into an addled fish that suffers a painful existence before becoming food, or too often, food waste, because salmon farms kill large percentages of the fish before they can be harvested. The New Fish is an antidote to naive enthusiasm about the blue economy, the vision of using ocean resources in sustainable ways. Humans need to understand that we cannot fully understand ecosystems and learn to apply the precautionary principle to decisions and business investments that have an environmental impact. You can find The New Fish, The Truth About Farmed Salmon and the Consequences We Can No Longer Ignore at Amazon, Powell's Books, and local booksellers. Now let's get into the conversation. Welcome to the show, Simen. How are you doing today?
I'm fine, thanks.
Well, thank you for joining us. The New Fish was a fascinating read, and I wanted to start off by asking you, can you explain how the new fish, the ones we're growing in salmon farms, are different than wild salmon? What are the differences that we need to be aware of?
Well, they started in the early 1970s with wild salmon, and then they started to modify it. Like they tried to find the biggest, fastest growing salmon they could find, and they combined that. They started with salmon from 40 rivers in Norway, and then they started to combine them in order to find the best combination. Something
that was breeding rather than genetic manipulation.
That's true. It was breeding. It was breeding, and they combined it, making it grow faster and faster, and being fatter, bigger, more effective in order to make the food production as effective as possible. So they started to, it's quite different from what you will find in the fjords and the rivers. It's a completely different fish now.
So like, say, the transition from a wild bovine, which generally the meat is healthier to eat. These are more fat intensive. They are one of the things I've always been curious about is why wild or farm salmon is not the same color as regular salmon.
Yeah, I mean, think about it like with the chicken, many generations ago, these were birds living in the forest and so on, and they started to combine it in order to make it grow much faster, be more effective producer of meat. So they said the salmon is a chicken of the sea. What I found out when I started to grow salmon was that it got big and fat. They were ready to sell it, and they opened the fish. And they saw it was white, just like a cod or a mackerel or something. That's right, because the salmon gets red because it eats shellfish.
Really?
Yeah, and the rescue was they had to invent some synthetic colors from a factory in Switzerland. And with this, they could add more and more of the color in order the salmon to get red, to get exactly the color that consumers wanted to see. So it's a paradox really that they have to add more and more of this synthetic color in order to make the salmon still look natural.
Well, of course, our expectations are defined by what we knew 40 or 50 years ago. Salmon was red, particularly here in the Northwest where I live. Copper River salmon is just a remarkable bright red.
Mm.
How would you characterize the state of wild salmon globally in contrast to how fast the salmon farming industry has grown? They're not doing very well.
I don't know how the rivers are up where you live, but in most of the world, salmon is actually extinct. You know, you won't find it in the rivers in France and Britain, and yeah, I don't know. I think it's going to be very hard to find. So Norway is one of the last countries. Norway and Iceland. Alaska, of course, but these countries are some of the last countries where you can find wild salmon. And what we see in Norway now is that the salmon farming is actually threatening the wild salmon. So the wild salmon is put on the red list and can become extinct.
How does the interaction between wild salmon who may still be migrating past a salmon farm and the farm salmon change the health of the wild salmon?
Yeah, so there are basically two problems. I mean, wild salmon is vulnerable to many things. For example, hydroelectric dams and climate change and so on. So it has many problems, but the two worst problems is first the salmon lice. So basically, salmon farming, the farm salmon are kept in big pens, big production facilities with millions of salmon packed together. And these facilities attracts a lot of lice, small copepods, small animals sticking to the salmon. And when the lice gets into this factories or pens or what you call it, it starts to explode. It's so many. It's basically swarming the salmon farms. And these lice are also swimming out in the fjords, and it sticks to wild salmon as well. So it threatens also the wild salmon.
So what you're saying is that when a salmon interbreeds with a wild salmon interbreeds with a farm salmon, it mixes up the genetics. And in the book, you relate how thoroughly coded to the specific place the fish hatched these species are. So there are not just one species of salmon. There's a lot of variations based on what river they came from. So when they interact, they literally genetically forget how to breed.
So yeah, it's very specific, you know. Actually, a salmon comes from one specific river, and when it reaches the right age, it swims to the ocean, and it can swim in the ocean for 3, 4, 5 years, even 7 years, and it swims right back to the exact same river. It's a mystery how we can do that, but it goes back to the exact same place that it was born, and there it will breed. So it's very finely coded, and when these wild salmon are mating with the farm salmon, it kind of loses all that instrument and all that skills to survive in the river. So it's a very fine and very special animal, or I mean fish. So this kind of very finely tuned mechanisms are destroyed when you start to splash together the genes from all these kind of different rivers.
They are a remarkable creature. I've seen spawn grounds, and they are literally alive with salmon fighting their way to the last moment of their lives to either lay eggs or inseminate those eggs. It's a remarkable sight. It's something I wish more people would be able to see.
Yeah.
Now, let's talk a little more about the industry and the growth of the industry. It started in Norway. How has it grown, and where are the global hotspots today? Where should I expect to find them?
It started with some pioneers in Norway. Actually, local fishermen started to keep this salmon in some kind of small pens. They sometimes, they made it themselves. They could see them from their kitchen windows, and a very small scale. Then they started to, grow bigger, and the big farmers started to buy the small ones, and it got to more and more concentrated. And until we have a situation like now, when the industry is dominated by a few, maybe 4 or 5 giants dominating the salmon farming all around the world. Norway is still the foremost producer, but today also Chile actually have a lot of salmon production, and you can find it in Canada, in Scotland, actually the Faroe Islands, and something also in Tasmania, the little island in Australia, and some other places.
Now, for instance, here in the Pacific Northwest in Washington State, we don't allow salmon farming, but just across the border in British Columbia, it's a very intense industry. Are our salmon being impacted by that industry, the salmon that are still coming from the rivers, which, by the way, are down, the population is already down by 99%?
Well, as long as the farmed salmon escapes, the biology, the animals see no boundaries. So if it escape in Canada, it doesn't stop at the border and see, no, this is the United States. It can't go here. It's the same in Norway as well. The salmon escapes and it goes to rivers in Sweden, for example. So this will affect, all the neighboring areas.
Would you say that people who buy farm salmon are getting a healthy product? And what kinds of chemicals or feed additives do they need to be aware that these creatures are being fed?
It used to be quite high levels of pollutants, like dioxin and PCBs and some other things that you find in the ocean. I think nowadays, because the farmed salmon eat a little bit more vegetables like soya, so it doesn't contain that much pollutants anymore. Although this is a little bit controversial issue. Like, if you're going to follow the recommendations from the European Union, you probably have to eat salmon only twice a month or something because of the dioxins. But still, the salmon also contains some, for example, omega-3. Proteins, vitamin D, very healthy things. So it's not, you won't get sick from eating it. And in many ways, it's also probably better than to eat, for example, red meat and
Sure.
such things.
Now, another element that you talk about in the book is how the fish feed industry actually competes with, in some cases, sources of human food, such as anchovies and other small fish that are caught off the coasts of Africa to be ground into food to feed to fish in the northern hemisphere or far southern hemisphere. What's the scope of that challenge? I mean, how big a problem is the competition between farmed salmon feed and human food at this point?
Well, so we don't know exactly the scope of it. The point is that the salmon farming industry, they say that they make more food for humanity. I mean, put it in with a very rosy touch, you know. People on the planet needs more food, they say, and they say they contribute to that. So if you go into a look at what's actually in the feed, and how this salmon feed are made, you see that the feed is actually made of fish that could be eaten instead of salmon. So let's say on the coast of West Africa, there's a lot of so-called pelagic fish, sardines and small fish. If people could eat that fish locally, they will have a lot of nutritious, good food. What we see today is that instead these fish are bought by big companies, making fish meal and fish oil out of them, and they sell this to salmon farms, and then the salmon eat them, and the salmon are sold to people of money. I mean, it's very expensive product, and rich people can eat salmon.
It's not going back to the west coast of Africa where it's being sold to people at a reasonable price. That's for sure.
They can't afford it, yeah.
Well, and we've had Philippe Cousteau on the show talking about how the same thing is happening in West Africa to produce the fish oil that you mentioned. There's a lot of intensive fishing going on there that's depleting the food supply locally. As you think about how we pursue the economic exploitation of the oceans, which is being painted as the solution to some of the world's food challenges, do you think that we are taking the right steps and doing it in a deliberative way, or are people simply rushing in and taking all the resources that they can while they're available?
Well, we see that big parts of the oceans globally are overfished.
Mm-hmm.
It's not regulated, and that's a big problem, you know. Thinking of the long-term health of our oceans. So that's going to be a big problem if we don't do anything real with it. And salmon farming is kind of part of that problem.
I think that's a great place to take a quick commercial break. We're going to be right back to continue the conversation. Now let's get back to the discussion with Simen Sætre. He is the co-author of The New Fish, The Truth About Farmed Salmon and the Consequences We Can No Longer Ignore, which was published by Patagonia just recently. Now, Simen, as we were just speaking about the exploitation of the oceans, do you think that national level salmon farming regulations are up to the job of preserving this species, or is a global regime and enforcement needed because of the scope of not just the industry, but the ocean?
Yeah, so what we see that is that if every country thinks for itself, and don't think about, you know, the biology, the health of the ocean, and so on, that's going to be a big problem. Because then each country will just grab as much fish as it can. So it really needs to be some kind of global regulations of the oceans, and including also deciding how much of each type of fish you can take out.
All right. Do you feel that some of the sustainable fishing labeling that you'll see these days on products is at least a way to send a market signal that we're looking for something that will preserve the species while continuing to provide food for humans?
Well, I hope that they are working hard with that. But when it comes to salmon farming, it's not really guarantee. It's more like we know some smaller salmon farmers. They are doing a good job. They want to invent better solutions using better newer technology and so on. But these certifications have not really been a big thing in salmon farming yet. Actually, the salmon farmers have some kind of unspoken agreement not to compete with each other in terms of environmental standards, quality, climate standards, and so on. For example, in Norway, most of the salmon are marketed as Norwegian salmon, but that's all. It's not like they compete with each other to say this salmon is better produced, this salmon is more climate friendly, this salmon had a better life than the others. It's all kind of lumped together as the same. So I think that's a problem.
So that's interesting. It sounds to me like the discussion that we're having about concentrated animal feeding operations, or CAFOs, where you have tens of thousands of cattle or chickens or hogs in a tiny area, like we're describing the salmon farm, that produce a lot of disease. Those animals are miserable for much of their life. On the other hand, we do have an emerging small farming industry that is trying to do more responsible farming, that are allowing free range, grass-fed approaches to raising the animals. And of course, that industry is several hundred years old. This industry is only about 50 years old. Is this a matter of making those introducing those ideas? If so, how do we accelerate that discussion? Have you seen the beginning of a conversation about it?
Well, you see, for example, in Canada, they're starting to make some regulations about closed pens. That means you close off the facilities. Means that the salmon lice can't get into the pen, and the salmon can't escape from it. And you will also reuse the feces or what comes out from the production. So if you can make these closed facilities with a good health for the fish, that's going to be a better solution for both for the wild salmon, for the environment, and I think also maybe in the end for production as a whole.
So if I were shopping for salmon, you would recommend that I look for, well, I mean, obviously wild salmon to the extent that it can be sustainably caught is one factor, but a closed pen approach, something that is there any labeling right now that would help me find the fish that you're describing that is raised in a healthier and more humane way?
Not yet. I mean, people have to be a little bit more demanding consumers. They have to ask some more questions, I think. Not only take what you find in the shop. And I think consumers should try to put a bit more pressure on the companies and ask a few more questions, not only buy the product. And if you can't get good answers to your questions, if you get the wrong answers, it's a good alternative to buy other kinds of fish. I mean, today you can go in the shop and you can buy any other kinds of fish, and it's probably more climate friendly than the farmed salmon. So you can buy cod instead, for example.
So it's important to speak up, not just to not buy it, but to say, look, I would buy this if it were sustainably farmed and humanely farmed.
and ask, was this salmon I buy here, did it have lice? Was it sick? Did it have viruses, bacteria, parasites? How many of the fish on that farm died, for example? What did it eat? Did it eat soya from burnt down rainforests in Brazil? Did it eat sardines fished on the west coast of Africa? So a few more questions will do, I think.
It's going to be interesting to see how the tracking of the provenance of individual fish and individually packaged food is going to evolve over the next several years. And we now have some technology that allows us to share that information, but how do you tell that story to consumers is going to be very interesting. Now, one of the elements of your story is how, as a journalist, you have been demonized by organized aquaculture trade press and various social campaigns initiated by the salmon farming companies. What kinds of resources has this industry developed to defend itself, and how are they doing that?
Well, they have skilled lobby group. They have been good at handling information. But I mean, this salmon farmers organization, these are very professional. But sometimes, from other people in parts of the industry or on the outside, you can get some kind of different pressure when you work with these issues.
You described some fairly serious direct attacks on your reputation. This is not a game of softball. It's a game of hardball.
That's true. Yeah, that's true. It's not a business for beginners. I worked for a while as a investigative reporter, so I have experience. So they can't really hurt my reputation, but I know how other reporters who are more at the beginning of their career, and for these people, it's actually very hard to work or go against salmon farmers with the investigations. You need to be fairly professional to do it.
So how did you get involved with Patagonia? Because, of course, that's an organization that is looking to actually tell the story of our environmental impact and potentially a source of a lot more information that we'll be able to use in the future. How did that relationship develop?
So, this book was a very surprising success in Norway. We got, it's you think it's a niche book, a narrow topic, but it seems that so many people are pissed at the industry, and it's starting to be so important in Norway. So this book made a lot of debates, and we sold 10,000 copies. It was actually a bestseller in Norway. I think the founder of Patagonia discovered this, and he was interested in the issue, and he wanted to translate it, to make it available for more people, and we're very happy with that, of course.
That Norway as a country is an interesting set of contrasts in terms of how they're dealing with the management of natural resources. They've nationalized the oil industry, where on the salmon in the case of the salmon industry, it's privatized. Why wasn't salmon, another natural resource or ecosystem service, to use the technical term, treated the same way as oil by the country? Is that part of the reason the book was such a big seller?
No, I don't think it was because of that, but you are right. It's two very different industries. Basically, oil can be exploited in very big operations, and the money goes to the state because the state owns the ground.
Right.
And Norway said we will make a very big state company to dominate that industry, whereas salmon farming started in the very small. A lot of people had one operation each.
But it
And
started in the national waters. Isn't that the basis for not necessarily nationalization, but at least more rigorous regulation?
yeah, but these issues are coming up just now. Now people are saying these guys, the salmon farmers, they make a lot of money using the common ocean, the common land, kind of. And now people start asking, should they leave more money to people locally? Should they pay more for using the ocean, for having these very lucrative licenses to use the fjords? But in the beginning, it was seen more like a small farm. And many of these people were actually farmers. They had a small farm by the fjord, and they put a little, salmon farm, a pen in the fjord besides the farm. So it started it was very small business for them, but now has started to be an international business, and with multinational corporations, and it's a totally different picture.
So again, we're still in the early stages of the development of this industry. Throughout the book, I probably made this same note 3 or 4, maybe 10 times in the book, which was the question: doesn't anybody think to apply the precautionary principle in aquaculture? And we are racing to create a blue economy. Do you feel that we are on a path to a sustainable blue economy, or are we? And we talked a little about this earlier. Are we headed for resource depletion because everybody's racing to get as much as they can while they can get it?
There are so much bullshit, about the blue economy. Sustainable. That's a word empty for meaning now. They use it for everything, and it's not operationalized. You can't say, what exactly is sustainable. In the case of the salmon farming industry, we see that they use soya from former rainforests to the feed. They use, as we talked about, pelagic fish from, for example, West Africa, on the coast of Peru, and so on. And they transport all this to the salmon farming fjords in Norway, as well as Chile and other places. And they feed this to the salmon, and then they fly from Norway. They fly the salmon to the USA, or they fly it to Asia. And as you know, by in 30 or 40 years, you can't fly anymore because of the climate regulations. So this mode of production can, I think, never be really sustainable.
You relate the story of how salmon became a staple in the sushi market, but that also sushi exploded as a food, as a cuisine all over the world at the same time, exacerbating the problem you're describing now, which is that this is a supply chain that goes not just around the world, but back and forth around the world.
Yeah.
As you think about the future, particularly the future of wild salmon, do you think that the species will exist in 50 years as a wild creature?
think it's very hard to say. There are so many things happening with nature right now, with the climate change, with storms, with the nature is not what it used to be, and it's very hard to predict, how this will affect different species,
Well, if we decide we want to preserve or restore wild salmon, do you think there's a path to doing so, or have we already closed the door on that potentially?
We can do it, but then some people will lose some money, and can we as a society convince people to do something where they will lose money? Can we sustain when they start lobbying, putting all their efforts into lobbying our politicians? I hope, of course, that wild salmon will live on, that it will be preserved, and of course, it's the intentions of the authorities. I think they see the point when the wild salmon is on the red list and so on. I hope they will save it. But nature is changing so quickly now, and it seems that we humans are not so good at using the precautionary principle or understanding what it really means to use it. We do things all the time that has a lot of unanticipated consequences. So it's very difficult to hold back,
Well, I hope that people take the time to read The New Fish, because it will open their eyes to many of the elements of the question that we're talking about now. And Simen, I want to thank you for spending time with us today. It's been fascinating.
Thanks for inviting me.
That was a conversation with Simen Sætre. He is the co-author with Kjetil Ostli of The New Fish, The Truth About Farmed Salmon and the Consequences We Can No Longer Ignore. You can find the book at local bookstores, and we'll include links to purchase The New Fish on Amazon and at Powell's Books in the article that accompanies this podcast. We've talked with many guests about the intense pollution and inhumanity associated with large-scale cattle, pork, and poultry operations, which are known as CAFOs, or concentrated animal feeding operations. The seafood industry and salmon farming industry have started down the path to creating CAFOs in the sea. These operations, as The New Fish reports, result in fish literally teeming with salmon lice, covered with parasites, and dying in droves before harvest. These sick salmon also add to carbon emissions as they rot. But as Simen explained, there's a counter movement. Small salmon farms using closed pens with fewer fish are emerging, just as regenerative farming is in land-based agriculture. And each of us can cast a vote by asking the grocer for healthy fish that have been humanely raised. He also raised several important data points that we should be thinking about as we make a purchase. Where was this fish grown and transported from? How many times did a plane fly around the world to deliver this product to you? Were the fish fed with local or internationally sourced feed that contributed to deforestation, or, in the case of West Africa, human food scarcity? Of course, it's true that most shoppers pick products off the shelf in a few seconds and don't take the time to read the label. But you can read the label, not just for what it tells you, but also what it doesn't. Ask the fishmonger or store manager for the information you need to make an informed decision. And if you don't like the answers or cannot get an answer, tell them that you will not make a purchase without more information. Then share your decision with others and ask them to make the same request at the store for the information so that the grocer sees a trend. That way your voice will make a bigger difference. I hope you take a few minutes to share this podcast or any of the more than 420 interviews we've produced on sustainability in your ear. Writing a review on your favorite podcast platform can make a big difference. It'll help your neighbors find us and get the information they need to make informed decisions. Folks, you are the amplifiers that can spread more ideas so we can create less waste. Please tell your friends, family, and coworkers they can find us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, iHeartRadio, Audible, or any of their favorite purveyors of podcast goodness. Thanks, folks, for your support. I'm Mitch Ratcliffe. This is Earth911, and we will be back with another innovator interview soon. In the meantime, take care of yourself take care of one another, and let's all take care of this beautiful planet of ours. Have a green day.